Normal office, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm only throwing it.
Oh, that cabin's got a little lemon in it and everything.
There's no tripes there.
Oh yeah.
Have a little tinker, like spikes everywhere. Have a little tinker on it to try and fix it again. Do another 10 miles.
All right, love. You're not the one stood in front of it.
Oh, see? Oh, yeah!
take a picture of the girl then?
See? Yeah.
Our help. No problem. Pop so you can breathe.
Okay. Good morning.
Millions, mate.
That's right, yeah.
It means you're not going to the right.
Oh, they got my name in? Yeah. Ah, yeah. We're in the
Right, good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 2 in terms of the Vintage and Classic Car Parade. And we've got a very fine selection of motor cars, an example of, or some examples of what we've got on display. There are about 100 cars in the classic and vintage area. If you'd like to have a look at them, please go and do so and have a chat with the owners after the ring parade. And our first car this afternoon is car number 2, which is a 1914 Ford Model T. And this is owned by Pat O'Donovan, all the way from County Cork in Ireland. And Pat brings this lovely car every year. Now, driver under instruction, driving a Model T Ford is an acquired art. Now, Pat very kindly showed me how to do it a couple of years ago. You have foot pedals to make the car go forward and back, rather than conventional clutch pedals. Okay. Right, just to, for the drivers who may not know, we've got a new system on today with red and green traffic lights. This can't possibly go wrong, can it? Green is go and stop is red, obviously. So if you see the green light, you're next in line, please come forward, okay? Thank you very much. Car number 10 next in your programme. This is a beautiful 1930 Delage D6L owned by Mr. Smith from Sturmison Newton, just down the road in Dorset. Beautiful car, Delage being one of the posher cars of French manufacture in the 1920s and 30s. Magnificent beast, good turn of speed for the time, and lovely to see it here. Thank you very much indeed. Please could you hold up your numbers when you come through as well?
Tell him about the green light.
Okay, car number 15, you've got a green light, sir. If you please come forward. This is a new system, this green and red traffic light system. Okay, now this is a very rare car, number 15. It's a 1935 Jowett Kestrel, owned by David Beresford from Glossop in Derbyshire. This lovely car was fully restored to its current condition by the owner. It was bought at auction, and originally it was intended to be a donor car to scrap for parts for a sister model, but it was decided to restore it to its current lovely condition. And very nice to see it. A Jowett Kestrel, ever so rare. Jowett, of course, they were a manufacturer based in Bradford in Yorkshire, and they produced many famous models from the 1920s to the 50s, with the Jowett Javelin and the Jupiter sports car being very years ahead of their time, of course. We've got a green light, Stan.
Yeah. Green light.
Okay, number 73. It's the next car coming through in front of the commentary box, and it's a 1969 Rover P6. This is the 2000 TC version, and it's owned by Ian Roberts from Severn Beach near Bristol. And the Rover 2000. The Rover 2000 introduced in the early 1960s at the same time or very similar time as to the Triumph 2000. The Rover was a very advanced machine, as was the Triumph in different ways, but the Rover had Dubonnet type suspension. It had a 4-cylinder overhead cam engine and was a very nice motor car. Now we were talking about stylish cars, here's another one. It's a 1974 Ford Granada Coupe, a 3-litre 6-cylinder engine owned by Paul Maycott from Bedford, and this was built to top the Ford Granada range. The coupe, the fastback, is a very rare size. Now just escaping almost in front of the commentary box. Apparently he didn't stop for a red light, so I'm told. We knew this traffic light system wasn't going to work. Now this is Andy McPhail's lovely 1972 Austin Mini Woody estate car, and he comes from Taunton in Healy Mark I Sprite, more commonly known as the Frog Eye Sprite because of the positioning of its headlamps on top of the bonnet. And this car is owned by Patrick Green from Fareham, and the car was built in November 1960, dispatched to a Cardiff dealer in 1961, and registered in Merthyr Tydfil, spending the next 15 years in the Cardiff area before moving around the country. 81 in your programme next. Now this is a Vincent Hurricane Sport, dating from 1971, and it's owned by Anne Dyson from Beckenham in Kent. And Anne purchased the car in 1973 as a Spitfire, Triumph Spitfire, and in 1983, after 100,000 miles, the body was replaced by the Hurricane. So this is a 1963 Sunbeam Sport with a 1725cc 4-cylinder engine, and it's owned by Vernon Brown from Sturmiston Newton, registered in January 63, number 49 off the production line according to the Sunbeam Alpine Owners Club, and was a successful rally car with a Coventry registration number. Now the Sunbeam Alpine, introduced in the late 1953 Bristol 403, owned by Mike Brockway from Colford in Somerset, and he bought this Bristol from a scrapyard in Twyford in 1966, soon mended a lump in the front wing and the car was on the road. There were quite a few cars like this scrapped when fuel went to 10 shillings a gallon, I remember that, in 1973, and it's done nearly 250,000 miles now, and it has been a fun car for 51 years. Thank you. Okay, if you could please just pause for a second, and I'll try and catch up with myself to talk about this lovely 1965 Austin A40 Countryman, owned by Gail Coles from Weston-super-Mare. This is the second year of ownership for Gail, and the car is running well. It's replaced runners on the screen, but her aim this year is to redo the paintwork. Well, the A40 Farina was introduced in 1959, and you could buy a saloon, 2-door saloon, or a Countryman, which had a lifting rear window and a boot lid which folded down as well. Nice dog, as Stan says as well. Thank you, yes. Lovely dog. And that's a Dorset registered car, Stan, that one. And, yep. You don't see many A40s on the road these days, and you certainly don't see many of the Countryman version. They were very much more practical than saloons. And this is Martin Wookey from Bristol with his very nice 1933 Morris Cowley 12-4 Coupe. And this was bought by Martin's dad, who was going to restore it. Some years passed by when his son Martin took over the project, and it's now been in regular use for the last 12 years. Now you see Morris Cowleys of the early 30s, but very seldom, or if ever, will you see one like this, a 2-door Doctor's Coupe, and what a stylish car that is. Very nice indeed. 12 horsepower, that's RAC horsepower, which was the system they used for calculating road tax, a ridiculous system based on the diameter of the engine cylinder. This was a development of the car you always promised yourself, which was introduced in 1969. This one dates from 1983. It's owned by Glenn Merritt from Ilfracombe in Devon, and it's a 2-litre S, 2000S, and it was bought in the year 2000, restored over a 7-year period. It has up-rated brakes, power steering, electronic ignition, etc. But still, the 4-cylinder, 2-litre overhead camshaft Pinto engine in this one. They also In the smaller engine, Capri's had the overhead valve Kent engine, and of course they also had the big six-cylinder engines. The Capri was produced until the late 1980s. Another Ford engine car now, but this is a Reliant Scimitar, dating from 1979. It's a Scimitar SE6A, owned by David Thorpe from Ashbourne in Derbyshire. And this Scimitar was purchased from its previous owner in 2006, when it had been used as a garden shed, latterly using it as an apple. Number 30 next. What an ideal car for a day like today. And it's Michael Cook from Leeds. So nice to see you all the way down from Yorkshire with this beautiful 1951 Morris Minor Series MM Tourer. Notice the picnic outfit on the back seat, if you can see it from where you are. Beautiful day for a picnic. And the Morris Minor, of course, introduced in 1948. It was the brainchild of Alec Issigonis, later Sir Alec Issigonis, and it had a lot of modern features, including torsion bar front suspension. This car and all the early ones had side valve engines based on the 900cc unit of the Morris 8, but the Minor had a 4-speed gearbox compared with the 3-speed of the early car. Right, now we've got a lovely car in front of the commentary box. It's a 1957 Vauxhall Velox E-Series saloon, owned by Will McLean of Shaftesbury. And well done to you, sir. I understand that you were working on this car till after dark last night, so you could bring it around the ring, so thank you. Well done to you. The Velox, of course, stood alongside the Cresta, the top of the range E-Series car in the mid-1950s. The Velox was lower trim level, if you like, but still very stylish. It was bought brand new, this one, by Will's late grandfather, then sold to a family friend, then bought back again in 1981 by his late father. We had one yesterday. This one dates from 1928. It's a Ford Model A Phaeton with a 24.9 horsepower engine, owned by Ken Clifton from Portisham in Dorset. And it's a 3.3 litre side valve, and believed to have spent some of its time in Argentina before coming to the UK. So if only these cars could talk, what a story they could tell, many of them. So maybe that car did spend a long time in Argentina, but it's great that it came back to Britain. Of course, in the early 30s, if you had a car that was rated for tax purposes at 24.9 horsepower, it would cost the owner a huge amount of money. And from a very large car to a diminutive British car, and this is John Bellows from just down the road in Blandford with his 1956 Austin A30 saloon that was bought new by John's grandfather. I think that's right, isn't it, John? Yeah. And John's had this car, or the family's had this car ever since new, so fantastic that is. Now the A30 was introduced in 1951, and at that time Austin and Morris were separate companies, so the A30, brand new styling, chassis-less construction. It was a brand new feature for Austins. It was the first unitary construction Austin, so it didn't have a separate chassis like the A40s. The body and chassis was all in one, so it was relatively lightweight. It also had a 4-cylinder overhead valve engine, independent front suspension, 4-speed gearbox. It was pretty advanced in terms of specification compared with many small cars of the time. And as Stan's pointed out, this is in a lovely Conway blue, which is quite a rare car, quite a rare colour. And the A30, this is a 2-door. And this is a 1939 Wolseley 1248 saloon with a 1550cc engine, owned by Brian. And again, as the car that went through in front of the commentary box just now, by pure coincidence, this car was bought by Brian Ely's grandfather when it was new, and it's still in the same family, which is great. I know Brian had a lot of work carried out on this vehicle about 3 or 4 years ago, and it really does look magnificent. Thank you, Brian. The Morris 12 and the Wolseley 12 were very similar in appearance, except that the Wolseley was upmarket, more upmarket than the Morris. Notice the pressed steel wheels. The doors are all hinged at the rear as well, which actually made for easy entry to and exit from the vehicle. And this one had a separate detail on this car, but it's a 1949 MG Y-Series saloon, number 27 in your programme, and it's powered by a 1250cc engine based on the XPAG motors used in the T-Series MG sports cars of the time. Very stylish bodywork. Notice the chromed grille. The 4 doors, the rear ones are opened in a conventional fashion, but the front ones, even up until the early 50s, were hinged at the rear. Similar bodywork, the central section of the body is similar to that used in the Morris 8 Series E. But that is fantastic motor car, two-tone paintwork. The Y Series MG's still here. This one's owned by Graham Edmund from Dunkeswell near Honiton. It's a 1970 Wolseley 1660 and built in 1970, used until 84. It's done 56,000 miles and had 2 owners until 84. And it was dry stalled for the next 32 years and resurrected last winter, just back on the road this year. And lovely to see it. And Graham tells me that he's looking for a pair of overriders for this Wolseley for the rear bumper, which he's found so far very difficult to find. So if anybody has any, please go and see him. He'd be delighted to hear from you, because somebody's bumped the one good one this week, ran into the back of it. So great shame. But the Wolseley 1660, it was. We've got a gentleman in front of the commentary box with his lovely MG, his MGB Roadster, and the 2 dogs, and they prefer the Morris 8 Tourer, John, I have to say. But no, John is a regular exhibitor at the Steam Fair with his Morris 8 Tourer and the MG, and very nice of this. Thank you, John, for coming around. The MGB, introduced in 1961, replaced now we've got a lovely, lovely car. It's owned by Carol Fenimore from just down the road in Wimborne, and it's a beautiful 1966 Austin Vanden Plas Princess with the 4-litre Rolls-Royce engine, 3.9 litre. A historic vehicle, as I mentioned. It's got a 4-litre Rolls-Royce engine, which was produced in the Vanden Plas bodywork. You also had the 3-litre with the straight 6 Austin-based engine, but this is lovely. It gave it an extra touch of class for somebody looking for a luxurious car within the BMC lineup. If you had a 4-litre R, you really had the top of the tree. So very nice. That's a beautiful car. It's got pinion tables built into the backs of the front seats. It's got walnut trims, plush carpet. Just a beautifully appointed car years ago from Ashurst near Southampton. No history is known of it until the 1990s. He's overhauled the engine. It's had new tyres, exhaust and battery, etc. And in 2002, the little car was taken on a road trip to John O'Groats, Southern Ireland, and then down to Land's End, covering around 3,000 miles. And he covers. We've got Jill now, and she said she'd come round. Thank you, Jill. In her lovely Morris Traveller. Jill is from Portland in Dorset, and she regularly comes to the Steam Fair with her 1969 Morris 1000 Traveller. And Jill has owned it for 20 years, and it's been restored in stages by Charlie Ware, the Morris Minor Centre in Bath and now Bristol, regularly used on club runs, etc. and garage. Now the Traveller, I mentioned the Morris Minor convertible or Tourer that came around earlier. Well, in 1956 they upgraded the Morris Minor. It gained an overhead valve engine in 1953 when Austin and Morris, well, they merged in 52. So they used the Austin engine in the Morris Minor Series 2, and then in 56 they called it the Minor 1000 by having installed a 950cc overhead valve engine. And then the later cars, like this one from the 60s, had 1100cc engines, which were the most powerful, 48 horsepower, but still giving 40 to 45 miles per gallon fuel consumption. Thank you, Jill. You see, much more effective than the green light if I just say thank you, and they drive. Thank you, Jill. This is Kevin Hawke from St Cullum in Cornwall, and I was talking to Kevin this morning. He said his little Cobb estate car is still running well, and lovely to see it back here in Dorset. Kevin brings it up every year from the far west, and it's a lovely exhibit. The Hillman Motor Company, of course, made the Hillman Minx, and they also made the Husky estate car, the Hillman Husky. They also did a Cobb van, and many of these were converted to an estate car, like the one you see in front of the commentary box. And this car came to Cornwall around 25 years ago, was brought there by the Roberts family, who retired in Cornwall from Chelmsford in Essex. And Kevin says that they bought her in 1999, just needed a respray, otherwise all original. And so that is very nice. Thank you very much. 4-seater, very practical car. The Huskies were fairly basic compared with the Hillman Minx estate car, which had 5 doors. The Huskies, now we've got car number 32, and this is an Austin A40 Somerset, 4-door saloon owned by Bob Coles from Weston-super-Mare. And he says he took over ownership in April 1994, and the car has already been on the road Sorry, I've lost the thread there. Stan was saying something. Yes, sorry. Bob took over ownership of this car in 1994 and it has always been on the road. Now we've got a supercar. This is a 1935 Brust Superior drop-head coupe, 28 horsepower, owned by Richard John from Buckinghamshire. It was built in 1935 and believed to be one of the first Brust Superiors ever built. They did motorcycles as well, as you may well be aware, but this is one of the first cars. Next one, number 56, and this is a Rover P4. It's a 100. They've made P4 in various designations, but this is a Rover 100, owned by Adrian Connor from Trowbridge. And this lovely car was put into storage in 1984 for the next 30 years. Its original has never been restored as far as we know. Say the owners. So the Rover P4, commonly known as the Auntie Rovers, it was a very solidly built car, separate chassis. Notice the rear doors are hinged from the rear. That must have been one of the very last production cars in Britain to have doors hinged from the rear, but making for easy entry to and exit from the rear seat. On the outskirts of Birmingham, of course. Right, we're nearly through our ring parade. I can't believe that. They've come around very quickly. But the next car I know very well. This is actually my daughter Rachel and Ian in Rachel's 1965 Austin A35 estate car called Aussie to his friends. They built the A35, which followed on from the A30 in 1956 in saloon, van and countryman estate car forms, as well as a pickup. This car was originally a van for a very short period in its life, then converted, as so many were, to an estate car. We've owned it since 1993, or Rachel's owned it since 19... Okay, and number 22, the last car in today's ring parade, and it's Anthony Whedon from Lockerbie in Hampshire with his 1937 Austin Big 7, restored by Anthony about 25 years ago. And the Austin 7, we saw the Ruby come round just now. The Big 7 was introduced as an alternative, a bigger alternative to the Ruby. So it sat between the Austin 7 Ruby and the Austin 10. And the Big 7 was so called because it had a
He said, how long's that going to stay straight? Second gate on the second section,
Oh,